If you are pregnant or you've recently had a baby, this podcast is for you. I am your host, Kath Bequee, a physiotherapist working in women's health and mum of 3. Join me each week as we dive into all things pregnancy care, childbirth and postnatal recovery, helping you have a wonderful pregnancy and afterbirth experience. And don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss any episodes. Well, hello there. It's great to have you here for another episode of the Fitness Mama podcast. Today, I am chatting with a lovely Fitness Mama member, Liz, who has a baby boy named Evan. Liz's story is a really honest recount of her emergency caesarean birth, which occurred as a result of a last-minute breech presentation that was picked up. So Liz shares her journey to becoming pregnant, including how she chose to freeze her eggs. Liz talks us through her C-section step by step, which she reports all in all was quite a positive experience. And I do often feel birth stories often really do dive into vaginal births, and we really go on a journey with the person who's had the baby. But I often feel caesarean birth stories, the actual C-section sometimes glossed over a little bit. So in this story, though, Liz really does take us on the journey with her step by step through her C-section. And something else that Liz was really open about were her challenges around breastfeeding. And Liz, like many of us, expected to fully breastfeed, and she wasn't prepared for the challenges she faced, and she ended up switching to bottle feeding at, I think it was 1 week postpartum. So stick around because Liz she's really open and honest. Like, it was an honor to speak to Liz in today's episode. And thank you, Liz, if you're listening. It was amazing to chat. And do stick around because Liz does provide some lovely advice to pregnant and new mothers who might be listening today. Before we do dive into this episode, I would love to invite you to come and join us inside Fitness Mama. So if you found you're not exercising as much as you'd like to during pregnancy and post-pregnancy, perhaps you're busy or you've lost the motivation to exercise, or you're not sure how to best be looking after your body, or perhaps you've got the pelvic girdle pain and the abdominal muscle separation and you're not sure about the best exercises for you, or you'd like to get back into running after birth and you want the best Kickstarter possible, then Fitness Mama is for you. Join us for these convenient, short, easy workouts that you can do from the comfort of your home whilst your baby sleeps or whilst your toddler runs around causing havoc or at the end of a long day at work. Simply head to fitnessmama.com. That's fitnessmama.com, and the link is in the show notes. Right, let's get into this episode. Liz, thank you so much for joining me today on the Fitness Mama podcast. It is an absolute honor to talk to you today all about your birth story. So thank you.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So, Liz, can you you don't need to give us a massive bio, but could you just let the listeners know who you are? Like, what sort of motherhood journey are you on? Do you have one baby, 2 babies? Whereabouts do you live? That sort of thing.
Yep, no worries. Well, hi, everyone. My name is Liz. I was a 38-year-old woman when I first found out I was pregnant with my first child. So a slightly older mum. Andrew and I wasn't really sure whether I was going to have a child in my life because I was an older mum and I had failed relationships. And then I froze my eggs at 35 thinking, just sort of a bit of an insurance policy. And then I met someone fantastic and then it sort of just all worked out for me. And we've got pregnant relatively quickly because it was always in the back of my mind, especially, a woman's biological clock, tick tock, tick tock. But so I always had that in the back of my mind. But we were really, really lucky and we didn't have any issues. So I didn't need to tap into my eggs or anything like that, which hopefully I'll be able to donate to research. And I wasn't, once I found out I was pregnant, I was really, really cautious for the first, probably up until 20 weeks. I didn't want to jinx anything. And I was actually really quite sick for the first, from 6 to 9 weeks was horrific with all day sickness. I don't know why they call it morning sickness. And then things got better post 11 weeks. And I had a really brilliant pregnancy post the all day sickness. And I really do attribute that to being as active and trying to stay active. And that's where your program really came into it, actually.
Liz, you have just given us so much that I want to just dive into. So I'm going to cut you off there because I would love to know a little bit more about the egg freezing journey, because I'm sure there's a lot of mums who are listening who are wanting to become pregnant, and that's just a really interesting, like what you mentioned, it's what a lot of women go through. So you hadn't found a partner and you got to 35 and you just thought, I need an insurance policy. Is that what you were thinking?
Yeah. And listen, the whole, I had a few failed relationships, but I never sort of thought I want to meet someone and boom, straight away fall pregnant, because you don't really know someone until a couple of years and you need to live with them. And I just didn't want that pressure. And egg freezing was relatively, I had a girlfriend that had actually done it. And she told me about the process, and she had some fertility issues. So that's why she went down that path. But then I sort of thought to myself, I'm in a position where I actually can, and I don't want to add extra pressure, because what if I don't meet someone till 38, 39, 40, whatever the scenario could have been. And I thought I can and I will. So for me, that was really, and I call it an insurance policy, but the chances of egg freezing and then a child being born from that are still relatively small. But I think I just thought I can do it, so I definitely will.
Yeah. Right. And how was that process for you in terms of the actual freezing of the eggs?
Yeah, so the process for me was actually was good. It was anyone that's gone through IVF, I believe it's the first portion of IVF. So you get to you have, I think it's 2 weeks or 10 days of injections and ultrasounds. That's the word I'm looking for, ultrasounds, to make sure that your follicles are getting bigger and they know when to actually procure the eggs. So for me, I mean, I work in the health field, and I did half a Bachelor of Nursing. So I can imagine for someone that is not in the health field, it would be really, really overwhelming. So, just doing subcutaneous injections, understanding all the names, knowing there are certain times where you've got to take some of the injections exactly 12 hours apart. I can really understand that it would be really, really tough for some people. But yeah. I think because of my background, and I had a few friends that had gone through IVF and one that had done the egg freezing prior. So I was able to ask a few people. Yeah. And I don't know, I just went in with an open mind. I think maybe perhaps if I had have been doing it with the intention for IVF, my mindset would have been not more serious, because I was serious about it, but there's more writing on that. I've had friends that have had IVF issues, and I can't even imagine to understand the mental load that would be.
So how long does the process take from start of the egg, from start to finish? So from start of the journey to actually having the eggs frozen?
So whenever first of all, you've got to decide which clinic you want to go with. I went with a clinic that their motto was trying to ensure that every single woman anywhere who they treat, because they don't just treat in Melbourne. Yeah, their motto was being able to provide a service, I should say, to women that come from all sorts of socioeconomic backgrounds. So it was relatively cheaper, and it was a woman a doctor who was a pioneer in the area in IVF, and she started up this. So I thought I would definitely want to go with her, because I just liked her motto. And it didn't take me too long to get an appointment with her. I think it was only like a month or two. you go in for the appointment, and I sort of knew a little bit about the process, and you have to do counselling with egg freezing. I think it's actually law in Victoria, where they sort of, just go through all these different things. And then, so I reckon from the moment that I decided I wanted to do it to the time that my eggs were procured, I reckon it was 4 months. And I think I was planning on going away at one point, or it was Christmas time. So I thought, let's do it in January where there's no issues with public holidays and things like that. And egg freezing, I only needed a day off work for the procurement of the eggs. So it wasn't a major surgery or anything like that. So it wasn't a long process. But I do know that over COVID, egg freezing has just, I think I read a stat that it's 300% more than it's just gone through the roof.
Yeah, wow.
Yes.
So when you froze your eggs, did you feel between freezing your eggs and then meeting Andrew, is it?
Yeah.
Did you change in terms of, did you feel more relaxed or?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I did say at the beginning that it was like an insurance policy, but it wasn't playing on my mind that much. Okay. I actually had I didn't have a vision of me having a life with children, or it would have, now having him, it's completely different. But whether I found that I went onto that path and was able to successfully have a child, or maybe I would not have met someone in time, I didn't want that weighing on me. And I just thought, whatever life throws at me, I'll just take. Having a child is, there are childless couples that have such a meaningful life, and I don't think that having a child is everything. I love the fact that I have a child and I can't imagine my life without him, but I did think that my life was amazing as it is, and whether or not someone came into it was just I suppose, up to timing. Yeah.
And when did you meet Andrew? How old were you?
I think I was 34. Just before my 35th birthday, I had procured the eggs. And I met Andrew when I was 36, almost 37. Yeah, pretty much 37 actually. Yeah, and then COVID came, we moved in, and it was COVID was bad for so many people, but for me it accelerated our relationship because we had never spent that much time together. And we moved in together, and and I don't want to say this because I know it was so hard for so many people, but it was a good time for us. And then in 3 years, Andrew and I have met, moved in, become engaged, bought a house and had a baby.
Yeah,
we really, really smashed it out.
And was he on the same page in terms of having a baby, or was that planned or unplanned, or how did that eventuate?
It was definitely weighing more on me because of the fact a woman has to worry about her biological clock, which really irritates me because men just have no idea. He never thought that there would be an issue, but I think, again, me being in the medical side of things, I know that things can go wrong, and fertility issues maybe I don't believe are spoken about with men in particular. So I felt like he was a little bit naive, and we definitely communicated a lot about what our future would be like, and he always knew he wanted children. And I actually didn't think that we would fall pregnant as quickly as we did. So I thought we would be trying for at least 6 months, but luckily we really fell pregnant quite quickly.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, so you had a rough first half of the pregnancy. Did you say 20 weeks worth?
I shouldn't say rough. It was between, say, 6 to 11 weeks, more so 6 to 9 weeks. I had really bad all-day sickness, and I didn't want to take any drugs because I thought, no, I'll just ride it out. But then I thought, no, I really cannot. I'm not enjoying this at all. And I had to work and I wanted to do all these other things. So I thought, no. Once I started taking the medication, that really helped. And then from 11 weeks, I didn't need the medication anymore. And I was really hesitant to tell everyone initially I was pregnant because, not that I didn't want to jinx it, but I know things can go wrong. So I didn't tell people till around 20 weeks. My family, my nearest and dearest knew, but it wasn't sort of broadcast out till 20.
And Liz, what is your profession? I don't actually know this.
I'm a health information manager. So basically my role, there's different career paths in it. I read the medical record all day and I transcribe procedures and diagnosis into codes. So it's sort of like a narrative, and that information gets sent to the Department of Health and the hospitals get funded that way. But it's also used for data and different types of research and things like that. So that's what I do.
Amazing. Okay, so what stage did you join Fitness Mama? How many weeks pregnant were you?
I reckon I was probably about 12 or 13 weeks pregnant.
Yeah. And what made you join Fitness Mama?
Because all my sporting stuff had stopped during COVID and I felt quite sick at the beginning, I sort of wanted to get back into it, and I thought, I need movement. Movement makes me happy. My mood is totally different with movement, and I just didn't want to be lazy. So I think I saw an ad for it and I thought, this is absolutely perfect. And I love the fact, because there was a lot of times where I couldn't make the live classes. So the fact that it was recorded was really, really good for me. And I probably didn't realise, I also love the resource part of it, because I was someone that I wanted to soak up as much knowledge as I possibly could for this journey. And I was telling you this before we press record, but nothing can ever prepare you for this journey. And I think getting as much information as possible is so important to making sure you have an informed pregnancy and you're in control. I don't like not being in control, and I really do feel like knowledge is power.
Yeah, amazing. So you're referring to all the birth resources inside?
Yeah. Just the different speakers. Like there's a few favourite speakers that I listened to during my pregnancy, and I've gone back at the point where, because it's a little bit different for me. Like I might have listened to different podcasts and stuff, but when I wasn't there at that time, I sort of didn't really soak it up. Whereas, for example, Evan's starting solids now. So I'm going back to the solids material and things like that. When I was having issues, well, I didn't have really many issues with his sleep, but when I wanted to know more info, I went to those sort of kind of resources.
So for those who are listening, every month there's a new guest speaker inside Fitness Mama, and there's a pediatric dietitian, starting solids, pregnancy resources, after birth recovery resources. So that's what Liz is referring to alongside the birth support. So apart from Fitness Mama, what else did you do to help yourself prepare for birth?
Yeah, we did birthing classes. Unfortunately, because of COVID, the hospital didn't offer them. Well, actually, someone communicated to me that we did, and then they didn't, and then they were, and we had gone off and done it privately. That was really good. But I think for me, trying to talk to my friends that had children was really, really important for me. With hindsight, I actually think the best way to deal with more so the newborn side of things, because everyone talks about the whole pregnancy, but really the fourth trimester, I think, is the one that is the hardest. So I really do think the best advice for anyone is spend as much time with someone that's had a baby if you can, because that's probably the best way to deal with the fourth trimester.
Yeah, just soaking up the everyday life sort of thing.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Pregnancy and birth last for 9 months, but having a baby lasts for, the rest of your life.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And it's so relentless. Like after becoming a mother, I appreciate my own mum so much more.
Oh, 100%.
And every other woman out there that's juggling a zillion things. Yeah.
Okay. So let's fast forward to, because I actually don't know what type of birth you had. You might have mentioned it inside our Facebook group, but I admit I've forgotten. And I actually like that for these birth stories, because I don't care what sort of birth story you had, because some people say to me, oh, it's a bit boring. I don't think anyone will appreciate it. And I'm like, no, there is no boring. There's no good birth story. There's no bad birth story. Like every birth story is unique. So I don't care what sort of birth story it is. I just want to hear it.
Yeah,
so
no worries.
Leading into your birth, talk me through those days in the lead up. Like, okay, was it Yeah. Were you having a vaginal birth?
I had always planned, and I never thought in my wildest dreams that I would have end up having a caesarean. I don't know, I was ignorant to the fact. A friend had actually said to me, Liz, you don't really, it's out of your control most times. And I thought, no, I'm going to have a natural birth. I've prepped for this. My body's ready. And I went into natural labour. So my actual waters broke on the Friday night, and I had called the hospital, and of course no one knows if it really is your waters breaking.
Where were you at the time?
Well, it was a Friday, and I had done a workout. I had done a fitness mama workout during the day, and I was just on the couch, and I sort of felt like a gush of fluid, and I thought, oh, is that discharge? What is it? So I quickly went to the toilet, and I had like a panty liner on, and I thought, oh, no, this is definitely not discharge. And then I had lost my mucus plug. So called the hospital. They said, come in an hour and we'll assess what's going on. And I went to the hospital, and they picked up a pad that I had put in a little zip bag because they said, bring it in. And she looked at it, and she picked it up and went, this is so heavy. This is 100% your water's breaking. And I hadn't actually started contracting yet. So I suppose my body did it vice versa. And they put me on the CTG machine, which is the machine that monitors the baby's heart rate and et cetera. And I started contractions. Andrew was with me, and he was trying to tell me something funny. And I had felt the first contraction, and I went, just stop talking to me because I don't know what's happening. But that was the first contraction when we got to the hospital. And they sent me home. And of course, COVID meant that there were so many babies being born that with a public hospital, you go into the hospital when you are into really, I shouldn't say severe second stage, but you're really far into your birth. So I went home that night, and my contractions were really far apart. And then once 11:30 p.m. came till, say, 5:30 a.m., I was having contractions every 10 minutes. And morning came, and I stopped contracting.
So how did you handle that overnight, every 10 minutes?
I'm really regretting now with hindsight that I didn't put on the TENS machine, because I didn't actually know. I thought, it wasn't such intense pain. I was able to handle it. I didn't get any sleep, but I was able to handle the pain. And it was, probably say 30, 35 seconds of pain. And for a while I was like, is this my contractions? Is this not? And then when it stopped at 5:30, I thought, oh, maybe it's not, because I was walking around and it was fine. And that day my mum was over, and she sort of thought it wasn't right me being at home. And I was having contractions during the day, but they were really, really like one every hour. And then I went into hospital because I didn't feel the baby. And then in hospital, in emergency, the lady palpitating my stomach sort of thought, oh, this seems like a breech presentation. And in my head, I just thought, nah, that's not right. He's definitely not breech. So anyway, we went up, and of course it was a breech presentation. And then literally within an hour, I was in the delivery suite, and he was born. So it actually happened really, really quickly from the moment we went back to the hospital the second time. I just thought we'd go, I'd get pain relief, we'd make sure that he was okay, and I'd come home. And then I was induced, actually. I was booked in for an induction on the Sunday, because once your waters break, they don't let you go. I think it's longer than 36 hours. And so it was really quick when we got to the hospital the second time.
And how were you feeling when they said it's breech?
It's funny, because as soon as she said to me, we do not deliver breech babies vaginally at this hospital, I had a bit of a relief, because I thought, how am I going to go through another day of those contractions, because I hadn't slept, and how will I be able to push a baby out? But then 3 weeks later, I sort of felt a bit ripped off that I didn't get to have the vaginal birth story, but it is what it is.
Oh, don't feel ripped off. You've got a beautiful story.
Yeah, it was, ultimately he came out fine, and my recovery was really, really good from the Caesar. But I felt like I had done all this prep work, and but if I may go back for a second, and it might be a VBAC, I don't know. But yeah, we both were fine, and that's the main thing.
Yeah. Well, that's great. And going into the caesarean, how How were both you and Andrew feeling at that point? Can you remember?
Yeah, we were both relatively calm. I sort of knew that once she confirmed it was breech, I had an idea that we wouldn't be progressing to a vaginal birth. And I think because it happened so quickly, I didn't have time to feel anxious or anything like that. And Andrew was surprisingly really, really good, because I thought that he would freak out with the thought of going into theatre and things like that, but he wasn't at all. I definitely think that had we had time to sort of process it a bit longer, maybe he would have been a bit more anxious. But I think because I read about it in medical...
The feeling, but also what actually happened.
...me out, to be honest. It really didn't.
So talk me through step by step what happened in the Caesar. I always feel with birth stories, if someone has a vaginal birth, we get taken on an absolute journey from, when they first go into contractions to when the baby's delivered. And then caesarean birth stories are often sort of brushed over in terms of step-by-step process. So I would love to know. So they tell you that your baby's breech. Like, take us step by step.
Yeah.
What you can remember, like through how you're feeling, but also what actually happened. You mentioned that you did a bit of birth preparation through the hospital. Did you do any birth preparation that you would knowledge for a caesarean or an emergency caesarean?
Not really. I totally didn't think that I would have a C-section, so I didn't do any research. The birthing classes that Andrew and I did cover C-sections, and from my job I was aware of what a C-section was, but it was totally not in my mind at all that I would have a C-section, which hindsight, I wish I sort of had prepared a little bit better maybe, or just had the idea that potentially it could go that way.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? And I think sometimes if you're not mentally thinking about that pathway, like I know I've done a few podcast episodes on preparing for caesarean, and I can link them below in the show notes. But unless your mind is in that zone, which it sounds like you weren't, which I'm sure is normal for most people, even though you hear the information, you don't hear the information, if you know what I mean. This episode is brought to you by Baby Bee, Australian-owned and designed prams combining quality, safety and style. Not only does Baby Bee let you try their prams at home with free returns for 9 months, yes, that's 9 months, they also offer an industry-leading 3-year warranty for total peace of mind. With thousands of 5-star reviews, around-the-clock customer care, and up to $300 of free accessories with every pram, what are you waiting for? Go visit www.babybeeonline.com and check them out for yourself. And yes, for listeners of the podcast, there is a 20% discount code. Enter FITBEE, FITBEE 20 at checkout, and T's and C's apply.
Yeah, I totally know what you mean. And because he was a surprise breech, like maybe had it been picked up earlier on, because I was a public patient. So from 20 weeks, you don't have any ultrasounds if you're deemed low risk, and there wasn't any issues. Whereas it might have been, if he was indeed a true breech from earlier on, it might have been picked up in the private sector because they do more ultrasounds post 20 weeks. But and palpitating, it's actually really difficult sometimes for someone, a midwife, to feel a head versus a bum. So, which I didn't know that until I was actually in hospital talking to one of the midwives. So, yeah, and I could have asked for an ultrasound, but I just didn't know that I could
100%.
actually.
Hindsight.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You don't know what you don't know.
Thanks for sharing, Liz.
Yeah, so once she confirmed that I had, we were breech, and she did that via an ultrasound, she then wanted to check how far, she did a vaginal examination, and I was 4 centimetres. And so I was like, oh, okay, these contractions were real. That's great. And then basically she came in again, and they go through the risks because, of course, a caesarean is surgery, well, major surgery. And then literally from the moment of the ultrasound to, I reckon it was 30 minutes later, I was being wheeled into theatre. There was the potential for me to be second on the list, but I think they just said, well, you're going to go in first, so there's no waiting. So that's why it was so quickly. Usually, depending on the hospital you go to and the urgency of other cases, that might not be the case, but I didn't have to wait long, which was good. And then they gave me a spinal. So I went in first to the theatre, and the theatre room is very, very cold. And I think the staff at the hospital, I birthed at Royal Women's, and they were communicating to me 100% of the way. You know, the anaesthetist who was putting the spinal in was telling me that, you know, exactly what they were doing, which was really helpful for me because I like that kind of information, and they made me feel really, really comfortable. But I can remember feeling freezing. And I remember actually getting a contraction when I was hunched over, and I said, just stop for a minute because I can feel this contraction. It wasn't I had progressed to 4 centimetres, so it wasn't, too far into second stage. But once they knew that the spinal had worked, then Andrew walked in with me. And there's a sheet over you, so you can't actually see your abdominal area. And I know that you've done a segment on, is it caesarean assisted births?
The maternal assisted caesarean
yeah.
section. Yeah.
Yeah. So this one was different because there's a high sheet. You don't see anything. And Andrew was to my left. And basically, they mentioned that you're going to feel some tugging and pulling, and you do a little bit, but you're anesthetized. So I couldn't feel any pain or anything like that. And there was lots of people in the room. There was the anaesthetist, then there was a consultant, then there was 2 registrars actually doing the caesarean, and Andrew. And then they definitely speak you through the pulling. And I actually feel like we were only in there for, say, 15 minutes. We weren't in there for a really long time. And then there's the whole Lion King moment when they pull the baby out and they show you. And I knew we were having a boy, but Andrew didn't. So I really I wanted to make sure to look at his reactions. Something that people may not know is the staff are really great, and they take photos for you because obviously the woman is, she can't do much. And her support person is so focused on the baby and her. So they took photos 100% of the way. So that was all captured by the staff, which I thought was really great because I look back at that moment now and I can see Andrew's face. And you hear the baby cry, which was amazing because I thought, I just want to hear him cry just to know that he's okay. And then they went off and they did the checks on him. And then they ended up bringing him to my side, and that's when we had our little first moment. And, then they was obviously doing what they needed to do with my abdominal area, and then we went to recovery. Yeah. And recovery, that's where it gets a little bit foggy. They did give me Evan and we tried to attach him to the breast, but that is a little bit shady. So I don't know if that was the anaesthetic. I didn't feel like we got a really big moment there. And then the next thing that I remember is being in the room with him. And we actually Evan was hypothermic and hypoglycemic, so he had low blood sugar levels. So probably say 3 hours post-birth, they came in and did some checks on him, and they discovered that he had low temperature hypothermic and he had the low BSLs, and they called a met call and he had to go to special care nursery. Now, I 100% know I was under the effects of the drugs because I didn't freak out, and I am aware of what a met call is. And had I heard that there was some kind of a met call, I know I would have panicked in real life. So I was 100% too high to realise. But, he was in special care nursery for a couple of days, and then he came back with us once things stabilised.
So he was there for a few days, was he?
Yeah. So he was the night he was born at midnight, he was in special care nursery.
Yeah.
And, then he was there so he was born on the Saturday, and then he came back to us on the Monday.
So what were you doing in between, like in that time, in terms of all the feeding and?
Yeah, so I really wanted to breastfeed. That was definitely a goal of mine. So I was going every 3 hours to special care nursery and we were feeding. Because of his low blood sugar levels, they had to give him they had to bottle feed him to keep his sugars up. And I'm not sure if that was ever one of the reasons why we weren't successful with breastfeeding. But yeah, because I suppose a bottle is easy. He doesn't have to work for it. But yeah, basically I think it was 11 hours post-op. I was going up to special care nursery every 3 hours. And even though it was really tough the first time, I do think that aided my recovery.
So how are you getting up there?
The first time Andrew took me in a wheelchair, and then each time after that I was walking up there very slowly.
Okay, so that was, correct me if I'm wrong, but that was quite early to be getting out of bed after a C-section?
Yeah, the midwife actually said to me on the Sunday, your recovery has improved so much because you've been so active, because they came out. So everyone was born at 7:47 p.m. on the Saturday, and then the next morning at around 11 o'clock, I got up, they took my catheter out, I had a shower, and then after that we went to go see him, but I wasn't walking. I was wheelchaired there. And then probably from 1 o'clock that day, from 1 o'clock on the Sunday, I was up every 3 hours walking to him. And it was a very slow walk, but that really did help me. And one of the midwives did say the fact that you're moving so much is a really good sign.
Yeah. So in between him going to special care nursery and you going there, like, were you feeding? Were you worried about, were you pumping? Were you worried about him? How were you feeling?
Yeah, so the first night, because I was so drugged up, the nurses were expressing the colostrum, and that was really helpful. And then the Sunday I was trying to do it, but I wasn't very good at it, so I always got assistance.
Yeah.
My milk really didn't come in. It didn't really come in at all. It probably took me, say, 4 or 5 days, but I was trying to breastfeed, or I was trying to attach to do as much skin-to-skin time as possible. I didn't feel like I had great breastfeeding education in hospital. Again, this is probably my own ignorance, I thought breastfeeding would be easy peasy, but I really found it difficult.
Yeah.
It was one of probably the second hardest thing that I found difficult in the journey. And in hindsight, I wish I had prepared myself more. But again, I was just, I thought it would be easy.
Well, so hard if, if Evan was in special care nursery and, that was the second most difficult thing, was it? What was the first most?
Oh, I think, the first one I think was just dealing with the mental fog afterwards. I remember leaving the hospital thinking, these people are going to let me take him home. Like, I'm not prepared for this. I really, and I had thought, I wasn't nervous coming up to the birth. I really did think that we were prepared. But again, I think this is such a life-changing moment, and it's great to be as prepared as you can be pre-birth. But I think I was just not used to the fog. Yeah.
Okay. And you might have said this, but when were you able to take Evan home?
We were discharged Saturday, Sunday, 3 nights. We were discharged after 3 nights. Yeah, but he came back into our room from special care nursery after 2 nights.
Yeah, right. And you kept trying to breastfeed there with the support, and it was just...
Yeah, I didn't feel like there was great support. Yeah, I think and maybe I should have asked for more help, but I did feel like they were so bombarded with babies at that particular time. I know it was very, very busy for all public hospitals, and there was exceptional circumstances with COVID. But I ended up breastfeeding for a week before I just said, this is just too hard. Yeah, and in hindsight, I sort of wish I had have seen a lactation consultant earlier. I had planned to see a lactation consultant a week post-birth, but by that point, damage had already been done. I had nipple trauma, and it was too hard to even put a pump on to express. And so we made the decision to formula feed. Yeah.
Hindsight's a lovely thing, isn't it, Liz?
It certainly is. Certainly is.
And that's the whole thing with motherhood. You're doing your best in the time, like in the moment. So you did an amazing job. Was it 100% formula feed after that point?
It was. And you know what, actually, I take back. I think the hardest thing for me was breastfeeding. And then I think the second hardest thing was dealing with the mum guilt that I had when I decided to formula feed. And to any mother out there who does end up going through with formula feeding, exclusively formula feeding, don't sweat it. I know I really was so difficult. I had such a difficult time accepting it and I felt like a failure. But now he's thriving. It was better for my mental health. And sometimes it just doesn't work out. Everyone knows that breast is best. Yes, we know that. And sometimes it just doesn't work.
Yeah. And fed is best.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And do you think it was mostly you applying that pressure to yourself, or do you feel like this might be a difficult question to answer, but where do you feel that pressure was coming from?
Well, it's a really good question because I applied most of that guilt to myself. But I do think that you talk to any midwife in hospital or, even I've listened to a particular midwife in one of your resources and the whole talk was pretty much about breastfeeding, when a lot of us actually do formula feed. And everyone knows, like I said before, breastfeeding it's natural, it's the best alternative, or the best method, but sometimes it just doesn't work. And I think people have to accept it. The lactation consultant who was really, really helpful for me, I was expecting to get a lot of slack off her, but, she really was so supportive.
That's great to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just going back to Fitness Mama, I remember it might have been you, but I know there are a couple of mums, definitely, more than a couple, I'm sure, but a few mums in your boat. And every so often I put a call out. I'm like, who do you want to hear from? What expert speaker do you want? And I do remember someone saying, I would love support for formula feeding, not breastfeeding, but, how to introduce formula feeds and all the rest. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about a living, breathing membership is I do remember getting a pediatric dietitian, and that video is still up, where she said, do you want me to talk about breastfeeding? I'm like, no. This session, just about bottle feeding, just about formula feeding. So, yeah. Look, it sounds like it was a real challenge for you, but I've seen Evan. He was in a class earlier today. He's a very happy, thriving little boy. Gorgeous. So, you seem to have come to peace now with it. How long did it take for you to come to peace with bottle feeding?
I think it probably took me a month and a half. Like I can't. It's a really hard feeling to try and articulate. It wasn't embarrassment. Maybe I was disappointed in myself that I wasn't able to, and it was just I had said to everyone, I'm going to breastfeed, but I think it was more just the disappointment, and also that time, skin to skin. It's nice time. I sort of thought in my head, I had this idea in my head that, all women can do it, but I just found it really, really difficult. And I just knew that for the sake of my own mental health, I had to make that decision.
Yeah. Liz, thank you for sharing that experience with us with the bottle feeding and the breastfeeding challenges, because I know it's a very personal thing and I really do appreciate your honesty on that topic. So thank you. Now diving into, before we wrap up, because I would just love to hear about your physical recovery after the caesarean. Like, how did your body feel and how was the pain or any discomfort and how you moved and those sorts of things once you got home?
I have to say my recovery was great. It really was. I can't knock it. I stopped the strong opioids in hospital. And I think it was because I was going to special care nursery so much after that. My body was used to movement and that kind of stuff. I really, for the first 6 weeks, I didn't do anything. I was, resting as much as I possibly could. I mean, I was so exhausted. Even if I wanted to, I wouldn't have been able to. And also a caesar is major surgery, so I wanted to be kind to myself. But, my I didn't feel a huge amount of pain. And again, my story was different. Maybe had I progressed more in my stage 2 of labour and really exhausted my body, it might have been different. Maybe because, I was only at the early stages. So I do appreciate that some women have gone, when it's a real emergency caesarean, they might have had a different journey. But yeah, my post-op journey was really, really good. And I do really feel like it was because of the movement. And also I was quite fit pregnant. So, I had exercised, apart from the first, say, 9 weeks or maybe 13 weeks, actually, I had really tried to exercise 3 to 4 times a week.
You're just a star. So we've got the live and recorded classes inside Fitness Mama, and you're a star member, Liz. You're always there, smile on your face. Hi.
I try and get there. I mean, sometimes it's really, really hard, and it is hard to stay motivated, but I know that I always crave the endorphin rush afterwards. So that's what always brings me back, because sometimes I really can't be bothered, but I know the feeling I'll get afterwards.
Yeah. And sometimes you often get that feeling after even 10 minutes. So often it's never a matter of not having enough time. Like I believe everyone's got time. It's just a matter of, it's like brushing your teeth. You've just got to do it because there's so many benefits, like health and mental health. As you said, you just feel better afterwards. So what are your goals now that you're, 7 months down, Evan's 7 months old? What are your goals in terms of where do you want to be at in a year's time, that sort of thing?
Yeah, well, I'm back playing netball and I'm doing Pilates. So I'm on mat leave now, so that's easier to coordinate. I do realise things are going to have to peg back a bit when I go back to work because of just juggling where Evan is and et cetera. So my goal, and this is something that's really important to both Andrew and I, is we want to maintain our level of fitness. We want it to be the same. I want to become unfit. I want to prioritise my health. I think that's really, really important. And that's through, I'm not really much of a great eater, but I really feel like my physical activity is my number one priority. Yeah, the benefits for me in terms of mood are huge, and I think it will allow me to be a better mum.
Yeah. Okay. Amazing. So you've shared your journey about freezing eggs, your emergency C-section, your breastfeeding challenges, bottle feeding journey, your recovery after a C-section. It's been an amazing story you've got to share. So thank you so much, Liz. To finish off with, do you have any final parting words for pregnant women listening or new mums listening to this podcast today?
I definitely knew you would ask this, and I thought I'd have this awesome answer. But I would say just to be as prepared as you can be. Knowledge is key. And I think also rally your village around you, because I think your village is really, really important. You feel so vulnerable after birth, whether it be a good birth story or a not so good birth story. Having the village around is really, really important. And just be kind to yourself. Women are amazing. Anyone that can carry a baby is amazing. And I think, be really, really kind to yourself, because it's such a long journey and it's a big deal for your body. So, just be kind to yourself.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much, Liz, for sharing your incredible story today. I really do appreciate it. It's been lovely listening, so thank you.
Thanks for having me.
We'll catch you soon. And before I sign off, remember my team and I will be putting together the show notes for this episode with all the links, including the links to the podcast on preparing for caesarean births and the maternal assisted caesarean births too. So check out the show notes for this episode or head to fitnessmama.com/podcast. That's it, ladies. Have a fabulous day, everyone, and I look forward to you joining me next week for another episode of the Fitness Mama podcast. Thanks for listening to the Fitness Mama podcast, brought to you by the Fitness Mama freebies found at www.fitnessmama.com/free. So please take a few seconds to leave a review, subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and be sure to take a screenshot of this podcast, upload it to your social media, and tag me at FitnessMama so I can give you a shout out too. Until next time, remember, an active pregnancy, confident childbirth, and strong postnatal recovery is something that you deserve. Remember our disclaimer, materials and contents in this podcast are intended as general information only and shouldn't substitute any medical advice, diagnosis or treatment. I'll see you soon.